My name is Major Alex Carter. 20 years, 5 deployments, and more briefing rooms than birthday parties. And today, I retire. You'd think that would mean something to the people who raised me, but as I stood near the back wall of the officers' ballroom, holding a watered-down cranberry soda and watching my family laugh across the room, it was clear I was the only one who remembered what this day was actually about. The table they sat at had my name on it, literally, a brass placard, centered neatly under a banner that said "Thank you for your service." But when I approached earlier, my father was too busy bragging about my nephew's ROTC scholarship to notice me. My mother waved vaguely toward the buffet and told me to grab a plate before it gets cold. Not a single "we're proud of you," not even a damn handshake. Just nods like I was the hotel staff bringing ice. I found an empty chair near the back. It was supposed to be reserved for the photographer, but no one argued. Probably because they didn't see me. It's funny how 2 decades in uniform can make you feel invisible in civilian clothes. But I wasn't angry. Not yet. Mostly, I just sat there wondering how a family could watch someone walk through fire and still act like she never left the kitchen. And the worst part? This wasn't new. It was just the final act in a long-running show where I played the role of also present. Except this time, something was going to shift. I just didn't know how yet. Growing up in the Carter household, there were 2 kinds of respect. The kind you earned in uniform and the kind that didn't exist. My father, a retired lieutenant colonel, had a clear blueprint for how a soldier should look, sound, and behave. Square jaw, loud voice, preferably male. I didn't check any of those boxes, so to him, I was just playing dress-up, even after 20 years of service. When I enlisted, I thought the uniform would change the way he looked at me. I thought it would make him proud, maybe even see me as his equal. But at every milestone promotion, deployment, combat citation, his reaction was the same polite nod he gave the mailman. Once, after I returned from Afghanistan, he shook my hand like I was a neighbor coming home from vacation. That was his version of affection. The truth is, he never saw me as a real soldier. In his eyes, I was a woman who'd wandered into a man's job and was too stubborn to leave. He couldn't reconcile the ribbons on my chest with the fact that I also wore lipstick. He used to joke at family barbecues that I was the support staff with a sidearm. Everyone laughed. I laughed too. Because if I didn't, I might have cried. There was one Thanksgiving when I came home with a sprained wrist and a black eye from a training mishap. My brother, who'd never served a day in his life, asked if I tripped over my heels. My father just sipped his drink and said, "Next time, maybe leave the war games to the big boys." I had just completed a survival course that most people failed out of. But sure, make it a joke. That's easier than acknowledging your daughter is tougher than half your buddies at the VFW. The worst part wasn't the comments, it was the silence. The way my accomplishments disappeared into the air the moment I walked through the front door. No one ever asked what I did, what I'd seen, or who I'd lost. They didn't want to know. It messed with the neat little narrative they'd built about me, that I was ambitious but soft, sharp but sensitive. The idea that I might be leading troops or calling airstrikes didn't compute. My mother tried to smooth things over in her way. She'd say, "Your dad's just old school." Like that explained everything. "He worries about you." But he didn't worry. Not really. He dismissed. He minimized. He turned a blind eye to anything that didn't fit his version of daughterhood. I could hold my own in a firefight. But I couldn't convince him to let me carve the turkey. There was a time I thought I could earn his respect by outperforming everyone else. So I did. I went for the toughest postings, volunteered for missions no one wanted, and became the go-to person for crisis response. I built a reputation that stretched far beyond our base. Commanders knew my name. Teams trusted my gut. But back home, I was still Lexi, the girl who used to play with army men, like I hadn't become one. I think what stung the most wasn't that he doubted me. It's that he never tried to understand me. He didn't ask what I did, how it worked, or what I gave up. He just assumed he already knew. In his world, soldiers were men with barked orders and buzz cuts. I was a glitch in the code. And eventually, I stopped trying to explain myself. I realized that no matter how many medals I brought home, I'd always be second place to his memory of what a real soldier looked like, which meant I had to find validation elsewhere, not in my family but in the mission, in the work, in the silence of a classified briefing room where nobody cared if you wore makeup, only if your intel was right. That's where I became real. Everywhere else, I was just pretending. At least, that's how they saw it. Syria was never quiet. Even in the so-called green zones, you could feel tension bleeding through the concrete. I was stationed there during an op that wasn't supposed to make headlines. Just a convoy run. Routine. Except nothing's ever routine when you're dealing with a local warlord who thinks landmines make a great welcome mat. We had intel saying the route was clear. My team was ready to roll, and higher command had already given the green light. But something about the signal traffic didn't sit right with me. I'd been tracking a series of patterns in comms chatter over the last 48 hours, and it looked too perfect. No noise. No anomalies. That's when you worry. War zones don't go silent unless someone's planning a punchline. I ran the heat maps again. I cross-referenced drone paths, flipped through satellite snapshots frame by frame, and there it was. A new thermal signature, tucked under a collapsed bridge just outside Aleppo. Too clean, too still, too wrong. I pulled the brakes and rerouted the entire convoy before anyone even knew we were at risk. We scrubbed the mission, waited 72 hours, then sent in a recon drone. The ambush was textbook. Tripwire mines, RPGs, and a sniper nest positioned to wipe us out in minutes. No one died that day. Not on our side. And the mission was reassigned with heavier air support. My name was buried in the after-action report. 3 lines long. Nobody back home heard about it. As far as my family knew, I was probably organizing supply crates or booking travel for higher-ups. My brother sent me a text the next day, asking if I could help him fix his laptop when I got back. He ended it with, "You're still doing logistics stuff, right?" I didn't bother correcting him. I just said sure. The invitation came through a secure line. I was told to report to a joint intel session at the Pentagon within 12 hours. No context, no brief. Just a time, a room number, and a note that said, "Bring your data." Most people would panic. I packed my laptop, 3 protein bars, and walked into that room like I belonged there. It was a situation brief on a growing threat near the Taiwan Strait. A high-stakes standoff was brewing, and everyone in that room wore a chest full of medals. I was the outlier. Civilian clearance, no combat uniform, just a name badge, and a classified packet full of predictions. They gave me 10 minutes to speak. I used 7. I laid out a multivariable strike simulation using live satellite drift, naval positioning, and intercept chatter that the others had dismissed as noise. I predicted not just what would happen, but when and how. The room went quiet. Then someone asked, "How the hell did you catch this?" Before I could answer, the rear admiral leading the brief said, "She sees patterns like a falcon at 20,000 feet. The name stuck. Falcon. That's what they started calling me. It made its way into cables, into encrypted chats, into briefings. Eventually, I stopped hearing Major Carter and started hearing, "Get Falcon in here." It was never official, but it carried weight. Not the kind you wear on your collar, the kind people move aside in the hallway for. I walked out of that building with the same ID badge, same quiet face, but I wasn't the same person. That day, I earned a reputation I never needed to explain. Back home, they still thought I was moving office furniture. At the Pentagon, I was clearing flight paths and recalibrating war games. I didn't need applause. I had access. The banner said it was my day, honoring Major Alex Carter. Nice font. Clean stitching. Probably ordered online by some admin who didn't know me. I stood beneath it while my nephew received a round of applause for finishing his first semester of ROTC. His uniform was still creased from the package, but my father beamed like he was watching Patton reincarnated. They gave him the mic to say a few words. He talked about discipline and sacrifice, quoting lines from a book he barely read. My father clapped the loudest, turned to the crowd, and shouted, "Told you! He's the real deal!" Never mind the woman standing 10 feet away who'd spent half her career writing contingency plans for scenarios this kid couldn't spell. I tried to stay gracious, smiled for photos, nodded at relatives who greeted me like I was staffing the event, not starring in it. One uncle leaned in and whispered, "So proud of you, Alex. Still doing that admin work, right?" Before I could answer, he added, "We need people like you," holding the clipboard while the guys handle the real stuff. He thought that was a compliment. Later, during dinner, someone passed around a sheet cake with my name spelled wrong. To Alice, with gratitude. I didn't even blink. I was too busy listening to my cousin explain how difficult it was to balance college classes with his part-time job. My father nodded along like this was a tale of valor. I once coordinated an evacuation under mortar fire while running on 36 hours without sleep. But sure, let's talk about retail hours. Then came the moment that really nailed it. A family friend raised his glass and said, "To Alex the paper pusher. Always organized, always quiet. Good luck in the civilian world, sweetie. Maybe you can find a nice HR job." People chuckled. Even my mother laughed. I lifted my wine but didn't drink. It wasn't worth the burn. I scanned the room. All these people claiming to support the troops, yet not one of them had ever asked what I did. Not once. Because if they asked, they might have to change the way they saw me, and that would take effort. So instead, they filed me under background character and moved on. The music had just faded under another round of clinking glasses when the floor started to vibrate. Subtle at first, like someone dropped a subwoofer on the roof. Then came the sound. Deep, rhythmic, mechanical. The windows of the ballroom rattled in their frames. People looked up, startled. Some guests rushed to the glass, phones raised, eyes wide. Outside, the manicured lawn of the hotel was being flattened by a windstorm. Debris flew. The trees bent sideways, and descending out of the night sky was a matte black helicopter. No lights, no markings, just a predator made of steel. A Black Hawk. It touched down on the auxiliary lawn with a heavy thud, the rotors still chopping the air with a deafening roar. The force of it blew open the balcony doors. Napkins flew off the tables. Centerpieces toppled. The string quartet stopped mid-note, shielding their instruments. My father stood up, shouting over the noise, "What the hell is going on? Is this an attack?" Before anyone could answer, the side doors of the chopper slid open. 4 men jumped out. They weren't wearing dress uniforms for a parade. They were in full tactical gear, earpieces wired, rifles slung low but ready. They moved with a speed that blurred. They didn't run to the hotel management. They stormed straight into the ballroom. The room went dead silent, except for the thumping of the rotors outside. The lead operator scanned the room. His face was covered in camo paint, but his eyes were sharp. He ignored the terrified guests. He ignored my father, who was trying to wave him down. He walked straight to my table. He stopped in front of me and snapped a salute so sharp it looked like it hurt. "Falcon," he barked. The code name echoed off the walls. "We have a code red. The bird is prepped. The White House is on the secure line." My father stepped forward, his face red with confusion and anger. "Excuse me? You can't just land a helicopter here, and she's retired. Her name is Major Carter. She works in logistics." "Okay." The operator turned to my father slowly. He looked at him not with anger, but with the kind of dismissive pity you give a civilian who has wandered onto a live firing range. "Sir," the operator said, his voice booming, "your daughter possesses the highest strategic clearance in the Department of Defense. She does not work in logistics. She writes the playbook that keeps this country standing. Now step aside." My father froze. My mother dropped her purse. My nephew, the ROTC star, looked at the Special Forces team with wide, terrified eyes. The operator turned back to me. "We need you in the Situation Room, ma'am. Wheels up in 2 minutes." I stood up. I didn't look at my cake. I didn't look at the banner. I picked up my jacket and looked at my father one last time. He looked small. He looked like a man who had spent 20 years reading the wrong book. His mouth opened to say something, maybe an apology, maybe a question, but I didn't wait to hear it. "I have to go," I said calmly. "Alex?" my mother whispered. I shook my head. "It's Falson." I walked away from the table. The team formed a protective diamond around me as we moved toward the shattered balcony doors. The wind from the rotors whipped my hair back, but I didn't flinch. I climbed into the chopper. The operator handed me a headset. I put it on, and the noise of the party, the judgment of my family, the Alice cake, it was all replaced by the hum of the mission. As the Black Hawk lifted off, banking hard into the night sky, I looked down at the hotel one last time. I saw my family standing on the lawn, looking up. They looked tiny from up here. They finally saw me. But I wasn't looking for their wave. I was already looking at the horizon. There's a kind of silence that follows you after 20 years in the field. It lives in your bones. Not the absence of sound, but the memory of people who stood beside you when it mattered. The ones who didn't need you to prove anything. They just knew. That's what family became for me. Not who raised me, not who shared my last name, but who lands a Black Hawk on a hotel lawn when the world is burning, because they know you're the only one who can put out the fire. And as the city lights faded below, I finally smiled. I wasn't Alice the paper pusher. I wasn't the daughter who didn't measure up. I was Falcon, and I had work to do.